know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose one year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. Patreon.com/punklautopod is the place to get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. And last week, what did we do?
We did the news of the world. So we recapped my show, your not so fun time off,
Yeah.
and then also the fun part of your time off,
Yeah.
and my trip to Paris. So, and then punk news and a brief look at Brooklyn Vegan and a little time on Stereo Gum. So just kind of running down the news of the world, as the title suggests.
Quite literally.
Except it's not. It's just music news of mostly North America.
Yeah. I'm in the part where you left America. For the first time, it's actually international. And I also released an episode of The Comps That Made Us about the compilation Statements from the Green Planet from Sublime Records, released in 1997. That's right. It's a Christian rock sampler. And it's a CD that we got when we were very young. Probably one of the first CDs we got.
It was.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was in the handful of CDs that we got when we got our CD player.
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to remember the ones that you got, because I remember I got that Love War album, and was this also where we each got like Carmen and Audio Adrenaline?
I got an Audio Adrenaline
EP.
I got some kind of Zombie and like an EP single thing, maxi single or whatever, where they covered the Hairbrush song from VeggieTales. And The Brave.
Yeah. And there was one more CD. It was like a DC Talk kind of knockoff group, and I do not remember the name of that one at all. Because I think I got something the night before for my Christmas present, and it was a CD, and I was like, but I don't have a CD player. And they were like, oh. And then, yeah, the next day we got a CD player. So I think I got something the night before. And then I think that Statements from the Green Planet was supposed to be shared. I think it was supposed to be both of ours. So, which we just shared all our CDs anyway, because we had 6 CDs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just wondering if you'd remembered anything about that sampler.
I remember that. I remember it pretty well. I mean, I haven't heard it in 20 years.
Yeah. Probably more than that, because were we really listening to it in 2005?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Significantly more than that.
Yeah. But you listen to it a lot when you only have so many. But yeah, it's fun to look back at that. But you can get all that for $1 on our Patreon. You can also sign up at our $5 tier, where that is our producer tier. So let's shout out our producers. So thank you to Dave Brown, host of the podcast One Band 5 Songs. Thank you to Steve Long, host of the podcast Rebel Nerd Radio. Thank you to Jason W., writer of the newsletter Songs About Chocolate and Girls. And thank you to Zach in Oregon. And as a producer, you also get access to a once-a-month exclusive bonus EP episode where, for the month of April, we discussed Off With Their Heads Hospitals. So we'll have to do that next week. Or you can sign up for our $10 tier, where you get to choose the album we devote an entire episode to. We got one of those coming up soon as well. So a lot of stuff going on over on the Patreon. Okay, for this week's episode, we got the year 2014. I know nobody wants to talk about 2014, but
it was over 10 years ago.
It's 11 years ago. We got to talk about some of this stuff. So it's always difficult to kind of really decide on what to discuss when it's this era. I did find myself having a very hard time choosing, and I have some stuff that I was considering. We'll get into that in a minute, but 2014 was rough. I think it's one of the weaker years, or at the very least, it's not that the year and the albums are weak. It's that like there's not a lot to talk about.
There's not a lot.
That was a big problem, and we'll talk about the reason why I passed on some of the stuff that I did pass on. But
yeah, I remember kind of noticing that when we did our decade recap of the 2010s episode, where we hit like 2014, 15. It was like, oh, these years are not as good as I remember. I was just paying attention to everything.
Yeah.
But it's like the volume of like really good stuff that I want to come back to, pretty slim.
Yeah. Well, let's see. 11 years ago, where would I have been? I would have just been working at Target at the time. I had already moved on from Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, I messaged our Snapchat group with you and our younger brother about don't look at your social media from 10 years ago. Because I was like, let me go look back at 2014. And I was like, oh, that's not great. 2014, I had been married for 2 years. I was unemployed, then worked part-time at a terrible cell phone store.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was at the cell phone store.
And then moved, and then I started working at the bank that year. So
eventful year.
Eventful, yeah.
Oh, I got married in 2014, so that was eventful. Yeah. In April of that year. Oh wow, I totally did not realize that I had chosen 2014 like the week of my anniversary. That is very funny. Yeah, so the first half of that year was just planning for the wedding. Yeah.
Yeah, that year I would have been doing, I think I worked through the college helping out with the Moogfest thing.
Oh yeah.
They did. We would have been somewhat active with the band.
Yeah, I think we would have been playing still because we stopped playing after you moved, right? I feel like you were not even in Winston anymore.
No, we weren't. No, that's right. We weren't active with the band in 2014.
We'd already slowed down.
We had, I think like maybe like the last things we had done were like the year after I got married. But then I think that, I don't remember if it was 2013 or 2014 when our guitarist went and worked on a farm.
Yeah, and that's kind of what
like
killed it.
The whole summer. And then we just stopped doing anything because he could never practice.
Because he was tired all the time. Was he living on like in a camper?
Well, he was like living. Yeah. It was like he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because 2014, I think it was even, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it was even late 2013 that I went and played bass at their parents' house. Well, they were working on what would become the next band that I would then join once I moved to Winston-Salem and started playing bass in that band.
Yeah,
it
played like metal band.
2 or 3 shows.
Yeah, which they're doing a band now. Let's plug them. What's the name of their band? Do you remember?
Decrement from Winston-Salem. Videos, the clips look great. They sound great. I'm excited to hear the recordings. Yeah, it's like a thrashy death metal-ish kind of band.
Yeah,
it's what they should be playing. Yeah,
it's what they wanted to be playing, and we're like, no.
Yeah. So 2014, we were like not doing anything.
Yeah,
musically,
just grinding. Well, we've covered this year a handful of times in the past, not too many times, but most recently in episode 269, we covered Crowbait's Sliding Through the Halls of Fate, still an all-time favorite album for me. Episode 187, we discussed Roswell Kids' Too Shabby. And then in episode 42, we discussed Dikembe's Mediumship, as well as the Reviver Bicker and Breathe EP. And I believe they did that episode with Paul DiCiccio of Tor Johnson Records. So, yeah, we've hit it only 3 times in the past because people don't like it when we do the 2010s. But you gotta do it. You know, we now have a rotation that we kind of stick to as far as like what decade we're going to pull a year from. And we alternate choosing between the 70s and the 2010s. The 70s because there's not a lot to pull from. It's just this very small time period. And the 2010s because people don't like the stuff that we have to pull from. But so let's look and see what is going on in 2014. Man, I think this is also the time period where Rate Your Music's punk charts are pretty useless because
Awful.
It just starts putting stuff in there that's just not even remotely related to punk music in it, and then not actually tagging the punk bands that are putting out music, because
this is one of the least appealing top 40 front pages of Rate Your Music punk charts that I've ever seen.
Yeah, this is a bad page. Oh god. Okay, we'll give you some context for here's the top 5 punk or punk as a influence albums of 2014. So Swans is number one. Fuck that band so much. Something called Dean Blunt. Never heard of that before in my entire life. That is like art pop, neo psychedelia, minimal wave, dream pop, dub, post punk, hypnagogic pop. Does not need to be here. Have a Nice Life, The Unnatural World. That's a shoegaze record. That at least has some, as post punk as a major genre. St. Vincent and The Hotelier. Out of those top five, the only thing that I would say is even remotely in the punk genre would be The Hotelier, and I just don't want to talk about them.
Yeah.
Notable records.
Ice Age. Is that a notable Ice Age record?
Is it that one? I know some of their other ones are probably a little bit more well known, but
I don't know where the one is.
Yeah, they have 5 records. I think the one with the Falcon on the cover might be. No, apparently this is the one. This has the most ratings and the highest rated. So cool.
We found it. We found the one Ice Age record.
Yeah, probably should have done it. They are post punk. I mean, they are legitimately post punk. So
yeah, sure. Yeah. Doesn't mean I like it.
No.
I mean, Interpol is on here, and they're a post punk band too. But Never Hung Over Again by Joyce Manor.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's all right.
Is that their like big album too? Is that considered their? Yeah, that's their big record. No, actually, the self-title is considered their big record. But
oh yeah.
I mean, Against Me's Transgender Dysphoria Blues. That's actually probably the most important punk record of 2014. That record is a big deal. You ever listened to it?
No.
I think I have. I'm not into late era. Again, I've never like super been into Against Me in general, but like late era Against Me, I just can't really connect with it all. I think I've heard that one, and I think I've heard that one after, and it's just, I don't know, just not necessarily for me, but important nevertheless.
I remember that Parquet Courts record mostly because I was massively disappointed by it, because it was like nothing like what was it, Daniel Stripe Tiger members?
It's Teenage Cool Kids.
Is it Teenage Cool Kids, or is it both?
It might actually be both now I think about it.
Yeah,
A Savage from Teenage Cool Kids.
Yeah. Currently lives in France.
And Sean Yeaton of Daniel Stripe Tiger and Teenage Cool Kids. So he was in both.
Yeah.
La Dispute released Rooms in the House. I don't think I listened to 1 second of that record.
Darling. That was the last Shellac record for a long time.
Right.
Dude, incredible. I remember trying to listen to it that year and being like, might not like Shellac.
I think you just like a song.
2 or 3 songs, yeah.
Yeah. Code Orange released I Am King. Is this the first without the kids in the name? It is. It's the first one and the beginning of their turning into wrestling music.
Yeah.
Because I guess this one's still a little bit more.
That one is
traditional.
Nothing but breakdowns.
Yeah.
I remember listening to that record that year and hating it and thinking, oh shit, we're already doing this again. And I don't think they've ever stopped doing this. I think this kind of beat down hardcore thing has.
Yeah, I think it just comes in waves and how big it is at the time, but it always exists. Free Throw, those days are gone. Man, people were really into that record and that band when that came out, and it was like we're on like wave 3 of that revival period, and I remember being like, this is so boring. It's like you took Mineral and said, how about I make this less interesting? We got an Every Time I Die record from Parts Unknown. Sleaford Mods, they're big, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a retroactive bump, if they're bigger later.
Right.
On the second page, we have Pianos Become the Teeth. I think just like fully sounding like a Christian rock band.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah, they like drop like all of their screamo elements. Empire, I Was a Lonely Estate, You Will Eventually Be Forgotten. One of the better examples of that style at the time. Oh, Sorority Noise. They were hot for a minute there, right? Sorority Noise. And then, let's see. Did they get canceled?
Did they? I don't remember.
They might have gotten canceled now that I think about it.
I kind of assume most of these bands are. As emo bands.
Yeah. I think they might have been canceled now that I think about it. Oh, we got a Pat the Bunny record. Probably Nothing, Possibly Everything. I think this is a solo Pat the Bunny. I think he finally just stopped coming up with different names for everything he put out. But yeah.
We got another canceled band, Young and in the Way, put out a record that year, and then that was like, it was Magruder Grind. That was Magruder Grind, was what somebody said later, but it kind of just stuck to Young and in the Way. It was just like, yeah, it's believable enough. Fuck them.
Yeah.
They just kind of went away. They just went with it. They're like,
yeah. But also, like, Young and in the Way also had that lead singer who, like, drew a pistol. Like, he was a fucking cowboy on a bouncer at a show for...
Yeah. They were the
somebody
pig
leave.
head at the comedy venue in Asheville band, too.
Well, they were also the pig head who somebody threw the pig and it hit somebody in the eye and broke their orbital bone. They have 2 pig head incidents.
They popped somebody's eye with a pig head.
I don't think it was them. It was like somebody at the crowd, but yeah. It was their show.
Yeah.
Yeah, they poured pig blood everywhere in a comedy club back room. And they're like, well, we got to shut down.
Yeah.
We got that Tiger's Jaw record. Remember when they were like, we're going to do one more and we'll call it quits? Because the whole band had quit, except for like Ben and Brianna. And then they just said, well, okay, here's the record. And then they're like, it's too good not to not break. We can't break up now. Look at this momentum we have.
Now it's the Ben and Bree band.
Yeah. I think
they don't let her sing enough.
They don't. Sports released Sunchokes. That was one I did consider briefly. I had that on a short list of stuff that I might do this one, but I wound up not making it one of my options. But the Now Remember Sports. And then, I don't know, 5 Seconds of Summer. Is that something? It probably has as much legitimate reason to be there, more so than even like Charlie XCX does. So, there's a Fucked Up record. There's a Circus Survive album.
An Off record.
Menzinger's Rented World.
The You Blew It record, where I said, it's over. That's the one. It was January of 2014. I checked out.
Well, it's because like all the fun bands had already broken up. There was something that happened. Like the very first like round of the emo revival bands were fun because they were like kind of messy. They were chaotic. There was like some punkiness to it. And then the rest of the bands that followed in that wave were like, and we're all going to do Boring Mineral, right? Yeah, we're all going to do that too. It's like, why? Why'd you all choose the same band to copy poorly? There's an Off record, Wasted Years. Prawn. See, this is it. Prawn, Free Throw, You Blew It. Those 3 bands exemplify where I'm like, well, this isn't for me anymore. I'm out of here. Just boring. I cannot believe how boring it was. And then, yeah. Well, let's talk about the ones I considered.
Oh, so, you didn't want to talk about Try Me?
Oh, Try Me, the Self-Defense Family record?
Yeah. Half the record is an interview with a sex worker.
Yeah.
And it's not exploitative. Just their citation being, trust me, bro.
Yeah, right.
We say it's not exploitative, so it's not.
I listened to those interviews like once, and I was like, well, I never want to hear these again.
I never listened to them.
They suck. I mean, they were like, it's a sex worker's bad experiences. It's like,
yeah, because a lot of them have bad experiences.
They do.
That's kind of...
It's because you're working on the outside of legality. So,
yeah.
Everything you do is illegal. And then so it's people taking advantage of that. Like, what are you going to do? Go to the cops? You know, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's people don't go into it because it's a promising career. You know, they have no choice. It's really. But no, don't worry. We put it on a record where the guy on it can't be bothered to write lyrics before he pressed play.
Cops for 20 minutes.
Doesn't that record also have the clip where Andrew's like, I don't want you to keep saying that over and over again? Something like that.
Why don't you change it? Yeah. It also sounds like dog shit.
Yeah, it's one riff for 2 hours. So yeah.
No, I mean, it's like poorly recorded too.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the ones I considered. So I did have a few things that I was leaning towards. And yeah, let's get into it. So I, for a moment, considered discussing Christmas Island by AJJ because that's a You Lost Me There moment. That's a record that is terrible. I hate it. And they haven't been the same since, but there have been records that I've enjoyed since, but the output is now kind of hit or miss for me when it comes to AJJ's newer material. And I thought it'd be interesting to maybe talk about that record just to see kind of like what went wrong, what works, what doesn't work. what changed between earlier albums and this one. He had writer's block. That's one part. But then I was like, but I also don't want to listen to it. And we have done an AJJ record in the past, so I was like, oh, let's pick something different. Radiator Hospital's Torch Song. This was probably the one that I was one of the ones I was very close on choosing. This is the one with Cut Your Bangs, and I thought that might be the reason to do this one alone, just because that was what
It's the one
Obama's daughter.
No, it was Kiernan Shipka.
Oh, why did I think it was Obama's daughter? I think it might have been in the same time period where like Obama's putting out playlists and like
He does a playlist he still does a playlist every year.
Yeah.
Or somebody does, and they put Obama's name on it.
Yeah. You're the president, or we're the president. Do something. But Torch Song is, I was like, it's either this one or the one before, Something Wild, I think is what it's called. And ultimately I was like, I like that other one better. I'd rather talk about that one. So that's ultimately why I skipped this one. This would be a good one to do, though. It's considered Bob Mould's Beauty and Ruin. This is part of the trilogy that he did when he signed Emerge Records. And I know it would be a good record, but also we've talked about Bob a lot lately, even though we haven't really covered him on the main show. I feel like we've just like mentioned him a bunch in bonus audio, and I was like, maybe a little more time could go by before choosing a Bob Mould record. I was leaning towards Hard Girls 1,000 Surfaces because we had talked about Shinobu so much, and we were like, maybe we do Hard Girls instead. And then they popped up, and ultimately I was just like, we just talked about them a bunch though. So that's another reason why I was like, maybe later. Maybe we'll do it later, but we've talked about them a bunch, so I feel like we'd just be kind of repeating ourselves. And the album that I was 100%, I was just like right there on it. I was just about to choose this one, and it's Rips by X-Hex, and it's the first X-Hex record. This is the Mary Timony band, also with the members of Bat Fangs as well, now members of Superchunk. And I was like, man, I love that record. I love that band. I thought it'd be interesting. We could talk about Mary Timony's career, but I didn't know for sure like what there would really be to say about this record. I don't know if there's a story there. I would have to research it. I don't know of one off the top of my head. And ultimately, the record I did wind up choosing, I chose because there's kind of a story there, and that was my main thinking when it came to choosing which album we were going to talk about. Just something that's going to give us something to talk about other than it's good. So those were my maybes. If it was your turn, what would you select?
I would probably go with I don't know. It's my calendar. It's on my reusable calendar, and I am not finding very much from this year that I feel like listening to. I would probably pick something like Pure Reality by Dark Blue, the first Dark Blue record. John Sharkey from Clock Cleaner. I almost said what would have been a Clock Cleaner lyric.
Yeah.
Puerto Rico Flowers, and it was one of the Ceremony guys, right?
In Dark Blue.
It's
Andy. It's Andy Nelson.
It's Andy. Yeah.
From Open City, we had on the show. Yeah.
Because I love that record. I loved that record when it came out that year. I've loved that record ever since. It's definitely one of the most easily revisitable. I could be, even though we've done them on the show a few times, I feel like I could justify picking this record, but Get Hurt by Gaslight Anthem came out that year. That is the Bud album. It's not great to my memory. I will re-listen to it sometime this year. I bought it without having heard anything from it, and then like I put it on, and like first song, I think my reaction was like, uh-oh. Yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot from this year that I think is very fun to talk about.
Yeah, I should have done my due diligence and looked back to see what my favorite records of the year were. I would have done that on Tumblr. Let's see if I can just very quickly, if this takes more than like a minute to search for, then I'll cut this out. But let's see. Found something. Ooh, this might be a lost one though. Let's see. It's on WordPress.
It might have gone.
Yeah, this is in that time period where we were hosting on somebody else's server, and then that server just died, I guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he just went offline, and then like I got it backed up from him, and I just didn't end up uploading all of it.
Yeah, so
To
I don't
WordPress.
really have a list to go off of that year, unfortunately.
Wonder if I could find it in my WordPress. I don't know. I did look at my last FM of the stuff that I was listening to, and like, we would have gotten this. It didn't come out that year, but I mean, it came out in the U.S. that year. But Pups self-titled.
Yeah, definitely would have been listening to that a lot.
Listened to
For
that
sure.
a ton that year. Weirdly, I listened to Heavy Fruit by He Is Legend a bunch that year.
Yeah, the comeback record.
Oh, the one that I had mentioned to you when you were like, "There's not a lot to talk about, much to consider." I think I had mentioned Dark Blue to you. The Level Up record, Hoodwinked.
That was, I listened to
was
that
a big
record
deal.
a lot. Yeah, that's the record to do from them too. Yeah, I thought about it. They were a maybe for me. I do have a list of records that I have listened to from that year. Bear Trade's Blood and Sand came out that year. That probably was my favorite record of the year. Maybe still my favorite, but there may be some other, competition. But
I think your best of that year, I'm fairly certain, had Year of the Snake by Songs for Snakes on it.
oh yeah, that was a good record. It probably was
Um,
like low, maybe in like the 20, like 15, 20 range, maybe. But yeah, that could have been there. Oh, Muscle and Bones, Peace and Light was released that year. That'd be a fun one to discuss. No one would listen to the episode because no one knows who
Yeah.
that band is. What else? I'm just looking at stuff that came out that year.
The
that I
last
have.
Xerxes record.
Yeah. Oh, that's the last Stiff Little Fingers record came out that year, and I did love that record. There was an austerity program album called Beyond Calculation. It's not my favorite austerity program. They have another record coming out actually this year. I think in May is when that's coming out. Yeah, there's good stuff. The Super Week's first big release, The World is a Terrible Place, and I Hate Myself and Want to Die.
There was that Dangers EP that came out that year. That was like the last thing they did, wasn't it?
Was that EP before the LP or after? Oh, that Mode Modern record came out.
No,
that
there
year.
was a 2016 Dangers record. I forgot about that one.
I listened to that Mode Modern record a lot that year. Very post-punky kind of gothy record. Like Canadian band, I believe, too. But yeah, I had stuff that I was listening to very heavily, but a lot of stuff with not much of a story or anyone's ever heard of. So it's like, all right, out of all the options, the record I chose today, I was like, there's something there to talk about, and we can kind of get into it more. So let's go ahead and jump into the album. So 2014 was my year, and I selected Teenage Retirement by Chumped. Brooklyn, New York. They formed in 2012. This was released November 18th, 2014 on Anchorless Records. And the person on this album is Anika Pyle on guitar and vocals, Dan Frelly on drums, Doug McKeever on bass, and Drew Johnson on guitar. And it was recorded, mixed, and mastered by John Meredith. So we'll get into backstory later, but I guess we could talk about our beginnings with Chumped. So do you remember where you would have first heard about them or got into them?
It would have been the EP.
Yeah. The 2013 self-titled EP, yeah.
I don't remember if they were on Tumblr. They were just like hyped, talked about on Punk News. like I knew who they were before this record came out. This was an anticipated record.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, did the record come out before or after Fest that year?
November.
It was November, so it was after Fest, which was a mistake. They should have released it before Fest.
Yeah,
so that everyone would have known the record.
It could have leaked, but also I don't really remember this being one that leaked. If it leaked, it was only like a week or two before, so it's still like after Fest.
Yeah, I don't remember it leaking.
Probably because there was nobody to leak it. You know, like the chain of like the label. I mean, it would have had to been like a writer. Would have been the somebody who got a review copy would have been the one to leak it, because it's not like it had a big rollout when it comes to that kind of stuff. Yeah, I can't remember exactly when I would have first heard them. Probably you're right, on Tumblr, or just seeing it on a blog somewhere and described in a way that I was like, that sounds cool. And I remember I listened to the EP and I remember liking it, but not really thinking a ton about it after that. I do remember being at Fest in 2013, and we were waiting in line, and we must have been waiting in line behind like somebody in a band, because like Mikey Erg walked by, and somebody on the line was like, hey, they got his attention. And like, so Mikey came and talked to him, and they talked for a long time. And like somebody asked, like, who are you excited? Who are you going to see? Who are you excited to see? And he's like, yo, there's this band called Chumped. And I remember thinking like, I know that band, but they weren't a band that they hadn't made a huge impression on me. And I remember that sticking out to me, that like, well, Mikey Erg likes Chumped. And this is when, people actually cared what Mikey Erg had to say. He was a pretty big figure in that scene at that time.
Well, yeah, so. He played in every single band.
Yeah,
for at least a minute.
And I do remember, I think they played that weekend, and I don't recall if we saw them in 2013. I don't think we did.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I don't think I saw them that year, because like I said, they weren't on my radar. Like, I heard the EP, but they weren't one that I was just like, I gotta see them. I mean, I probably saw them on the list and had some other conflict that I wanted to see instead. So I didn't see them in 2013, but I do remember there used to be this thing that would happen like every year at Fest, where there would be one hyped band. There would be this band that people would be like, you got to see this band. They're playing this year. They're playing here. Or like, oh, you should have seen them last night. They were so good, and you would see like the shirts everywhere the next day. Caves was one of those bands at one point. And I think Chumped was that year's band that everybody was like, did you see Chumped, or you gonna go see Chumped? And it was that kind of thing. You saw some shirts maybe. So like that, I remember coming away from Fest thinking, I should pay more attention to this band. And so then we would have seen them the following year. We saw them in 2014's Fest, and it's before the album came out, and they were playing the Palomino at the indoor portion of it, which is literally like a 6-inch stage. Like, it's so fucking short, and so you can't see anything. You're basically standing on the floor, unless you stand in the very back of the room on top of these like seats or bleachers that they have sort of against the wall. And I remember we watched them play from there, and
yeah, was that was the 2014 show, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I remember seeing them in the Palomino on the tiny stage, and I remember Rambo 3 being on the TV during their whole set. So it was like, watch a little bit of Rambo, watch a little bit of Chumped, watch a little bit of Rambo. And I remember the end credits with this film is dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters at the end. Did we see their last Fest show?
No. So, okay, yeah. That's giving the story away, but yeah, then the following year we could have seen them, but we'll get into that too. Yeah, and then after Fest, the record would have come out in 2014, and then we would have listened to it, and I know it was on my best of list that year. It was one of the records I chose, so maybe in the top 10, maybe not the top 20, or definitely the top 10. I liked it at the time, and then kind of fell off. When a band ceases to be, you sometimes just kind of quit listening to them too. Just occasionally will happen, but yeah, that's kind of it was a very short period of here they are, now they're gone. So let's get into the backstory a little bit. So Anika Pyle, Drew Johnson, and Dan Frelly were all childhood friends in Monument, Colorado, and they were they're local musicians. They had some bands at the time. They had some, they play acoustic solo stuff. They all did a little bit in the scene at the time. But it's not until the band members moved to New York that they actually formed Chumped. So Drew Johnson and Anika Pyle both moved to New York, and they all have real jobs. They all have full-time adult jobs. And Anika was working for some company that went to a farmer's market in New Jersey, where she met bassist Doug McKeever, who was also working at a different, booth at this farmer's market. So they got to know each other there, and they decided, hey, let's start a band. So they tried out various drummers throughout the years, and until Dan Frelly decided to move from Colorado to Brooklyn. And once he got to New York, they're like, "Do you want to play drums for us?" And he's like, "Yeah." Even though I don't play drums, he was not a drummer. He just agreed to do it, just to be in the band. And they would like jam in their apartment. They would write songs together. They would then get some attention and start playing shows, opening for bands in New York at the time. And they would meet the owner of Anchorless Records, who was Neil Schulman. And they had planned on releasing their debut EP just digitally online, just throw it up on Bandcamp. But Neil was like, "Let me put it out." So they put it out on vinyl. And Anchorless, was this a label that you had any recollection of?
No.
When I saw the name, I was like, holy shit, I haven't thought about that record label in years. There was a time period where there were like these DIY punk labels that were dime a dozen. There were so many of these things. And so here's a little list of some stuff that Anchorless released. They put out music by Tumbledown, which is the Mike Herrera of MXPX's acoustic country side project. Music by the St. Catharines. He released that Brendan Kelly and Joe McMahon album, Nightlights. This is some remember some names bands here. Nightlights, How Dare You. There were two 4-way splits. The first one I didn't remember at all, but the second one was the one with Dead to Me and The Holy Mess, but also How Dare You and In the Red. He released some Mikey Erg, also some Almost People, the Durham band. So yeah, Anchorless was weird that he was able to get like Brendan Kelly and Mikey Erg and those kind of bands on this really small label. But the band began touring in 2014, and then that year they went into a DIY basement studio owned by John Meredith in Ridgewood, Queens, and he had played in some various bands throughout the years, but his most notable recording credits are the Crowbait Separate Stations EP. He did a Quaker Wedding LP as well as one of the Somerset Thrower albums. And yeah, they released an EP called That's the Thing Is Like in 2014, which kind of served as a kind of a single teaser for the LP because it featured the song Hot 97 Summer Jam and then like two other tracks as well that are not on the LP. And the name of the record comes from a band name that some of them were in prior to Chumped back in Colorado. But yeah, so that's kind of the main lead up to the record. So it's just this like little band. They're friends from Colorado, moved to New York, and started a band together.
It's a very Muppets Take Manhattan story.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about the record a little bit before we get too far. And Teenage Retirement. What do you remember about the record back then?
I remember listening to it pretty intently, and I remember enjoying the record. I would say I liked it pretty well. I listened to it a good bit for the rest of that year. I don't recall how much more intent. I would have listened to them a little bit in 2015 as well, and then they broke up. I also remember there being an air of disappointment with this record, just generally, I guess, online. And I think that colored my own interest in the record.
Yeah, I remember they were really hyped. It was a big, they were a hype band, and there was a lot of attention and pressure kind of being like, the record's coming. I hope it's good. And I do remember that, having that same kind of reaction to it being like, it's good, but it's not what I thought it would be. Like, I think there was more, I don't know, if you just like, you build it up too much in your mind when it comes to something like that, you're just like, oh, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. And then it doesn't quite live up to those expectations. I do remember liking it and putting it on my best of list, but yeah, not to the degree that I thought I would have liked it.
Yeah. And so I've looked back on this record and looked back on this band with that, oh, that was a disappointing band. That was a record that didn't live up to the hype. This time period, really bad for hyping things.
So yeah, you mentioned that before, when we were choosing the record, and you were talking about how there were a lot of things that were hyped up that did not live up to their expectations. And I guess there was like the Polar Bear Club kind of fizzled out. Yeah,
those records didn't turn out to be as good. Well, I think I was also thinking of like, there was the massive hype that like gave us 3 Beach Slang LPs.
Yeah.
It's like, that should have been a 2 EPs band. Should have gotten more Chumped records. That's what we should have got. But there was the hype for Pup, and they are still going.
It's true. There was hype there. Yeah, I can see what you mean. There were a lot of bands where it's like they kind of did not live up to the hype. And
it was, I don't know what it was. Was it Collectors? Was it, because I feel like it was kind of in step with the buying multiple colorways of vinyl that punks were doing at this time period. I feel like it was kind of the same. Like, oh, we need this band to take off, so these records are going to be worth money.
Yeah. It was a time period of just like, yeah, you got to buy all the colors. You got to get every color. It was kind of happening across the board, though, with vinyl. It was definitely something that...
But I also wonder if hype was so strong for DIY bands. These are bands that are playing basements, Yeah. I wonder if the hype was so strong for these bands then because there were so many blogs.
Yeah. There were a lot of blogs at the time. That's kind of how music was spread around too.
Well, and you could send your stuff to places and get it reviewed.
Yeah.
Pretty easily.
And there are still it's not nearly as strong as it used to be. There's a little bit of a comeback with blogs, but yeah, not.
There's a handful of good blogs, and then there's a shitload of pay-to-play blogs.
Yeah.
That no one reads. I don't know. I was thinking about that because it was like, this record was the record of the week on Stereo Gum when it was released. It was reviewed positively in Pitchfork. I didn't read the whole review because it was unreadable, pretentious garbage. It was talked about everywhere. Like, it was reviewed everywhere that I could find. Like, if you look this album up, you find reviews from 2014.
A lot of them. In
the first 2 or 3 pages of Google results. It's like all it is. And a couple of interviews. Because there's like a Stereo Gum interview that I read, and there's articles about their last shows, about them breaking up.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking about how Anchorless was this, not a big label, but this got reviewed everywhere in all of the big places, and it's not really the kind of record that should get reviewed everywhere, like this DIY punk band on a DIY punk label. Like, should they be getting Stereo Gum and Pitchfork reviews like all the time? They don't do that kind of stuff now, I guess there was that little tiny period where that kind of stuff was just getting covered everywhere. So yeah, if you think about it, there was a lot of hype in the sense that like these big outlets were talking about it. So revisiting it, what did you think of it?
It is a good record, but I think I now understand its limitations in a way that I didn't then. And because it's funny, I was looking at my Last FM from that year, like the most listened stuff, and like every other record on my Last FM is like a record that came out that year or came out in 2013. Like I was listening to new records so repeatedly throughout a year. And like, yeah, you might hear me say that and think, yeah, that's what normal people do. You get a record and you listen to it a bunch of times. I don't know. What do you, and it's like, I wasn't at the point of, even though I did feel like I was like always listening to something new or new to me every week. Like I would come back to stuff in a way that I don't really anymore. And I try to be a little more mindful about doing it now. But I realized, well, I was just thinking about that and how so much of the stuff that shows up on like my Last FM of what I listened to that came out that year, and like looking at the stuff that I had rated on Rate Your Music, and I'm like, I don't really need to go back to this. Like, I don't know that I need to go listen to the Daggers record that came out that year. Or that Caution Children record was good, but like, I don't know. Really need to go back to it? The Abject Object LP.
I don't even remember what that is.
Just, you would listen to stuff. Like there'd be like, oh, well, here's my new record. And you would listen to it like 3 times and then not come back to it ever. And I think that where a lot of the disappointment in this Chumped record came from was in the expectation that this would be above and beyond. Like this would be something that would become something. There was an expectation of this is going to be a record that I'm going to listen to regularly for years in the way that, I don't know, Gaslight Anthem records or Dillinger 4 records had become, staples of my listening. Alkaline Trio records, whatever. And like, it's funny because there's like, we talked about that Crowbait record, one-off LP by a band, and how incredible it still is, how I can come back to that record and love it. And it's like a 5-star LP for me. And I think this Chumped record could have been that, but it wasn't. And it still isn't. And I know now, I think listening to it this time, it's because they didn't really try.
You think they didn't try like in the songwriting, like the record?
Well, that's the thing. So like I was reading interviews and like kind of like the story of the band, and their attitude was just like, I don't know, let's do this, I guess. We're gonna put this on Bandcamp, and then people are like, wait a minute. Someone else might be interested in this. They were just like, yeah, well, all right, here you go, whatever. And like they had some songs on this record had been around for a long time. They had written them, and maybe they didn't make it to the EP or whatever. Like they just kind of kicked some of these songs down the road a little bit and worked on them over time. And then other songs they wrote like the day before the record they went to record. The EP, they recorded it in like a day. This LP, they recorded in like 3 days. And it's like, there's nothing wrong necessarily with doing that. They just tracked it all live to tape and, maybe did minimal overdubs. But like, I don't think that they ever considered, and I think it's just being a young band, that they could have taken more time, that they could have like made sure to have a stronger LP from beginning to end, that they could have taken 5 days to record instead of 3. Like, and I think too, they put too many of the best songs up front. The sequencing hurts.
Yeah, this is a poorly sequenced record. Yeah.
So it loses steam by the end, and I'm just like, oh, there's the flaw. There's the half-baked idea that made it to the LP that they should have taken a little more time. And it just kind of, it's like, oh, they didn't quite have a strong enough melody for this song. And all of that's on the back half, and it just makes the record feel longer than it is. Because I listened to the LP, I then immediately listened to the EP.
Yeah, I did too.
And it was like a breath of fresh air. I was like, oh, I'm alive again. I like Chumped again. So there's just something about the LP back half in particular.
Well, I can tell you what's wrong with the back half, but
the slow songs.
They put all the slow songs there, and they
Yeah.
ended it on 2 of the same kind of slow song.
Yeah.
They did 2 exact same structured slow songs as the last 2 tracks. It's like, you should have had one of these as like your end of 8 side A. Like, you shouldn't have done them back to back. Now, maybe part of the problem is they only recorded so many songs, and they were like, these are our weakest songs, so let's just put them at the back of the record where people maybe don't get to them as frequently. Yeah. That is a sequencing philosophy. I don't think that's a good philosophy.
I don't think top heavy is a good sequencing.
No, I don't think you rank them in the order of best to worst. I don't think it's a good order.
Yeah, because that makes the last quarter of the record expendable. It makes people want to turn the record off sooner. It makes people not want to come back to it because the last impression of it was, yeah, that record's kind of slow.
Yeah, because it leaves you with the impression that it's a slow album, even though maybe the first half is not a slow album.
And I don't think that they had to be. Well, so there's I think their name, the teenage retirement name of this LP, I think their general, like, we're just like, a band. Like, their whole, like, we don't know what we're doing at all, and we're just figuring it out as we go. It shows too much. Yeah, I do wonder if this is a case of a band who, they wait. I don't know. Okay, so they put the EP out in 2013. Great EP. And then they do nothing. No singles, no splits, like, this is a time period where bands are like putting out splits and EPs and singles like every other month. Like, it feels like this is a very active time period for that kind of like DIY, like, we got a 7-inch coming out in March, and then in June we're going to do this EP, and then we're going to go on this tour, and we need a 7-inch for this tour. Like, every band who had to have like a new 7-inch for every tour they went on. They could have done that. They didn't do any of that. They could have split most of these songs up into EPs and splits over the course of the next year, and then done an LP. Yeah. Or they just waited too long to do the LP too. Like, you could have followed up that first EP with an LP within the first 6 months. Well, they had to finish writing it. Yeah. Which is fine. Like, take the time and finish writing it. Like, if you really want to do a record. I just get the impression that they did a record because they thought that was what they were supposed to do next. Also, I don't know that they should have stayed on Anchorless for the LP. Like, yeah, the EP is cool. Yeah, it's good. And you put it out on Anchorless. But you're getting Pitchfork reviews. I mean, I know some of that's hype, and that's just what they just chose to cover at the time, but... Yeah, I mean, they didn't get the Pitchfork review until the LP, though, right? I don't think they got... Yeah, I don't know. I don't know when the reviews came out, but yeah. I don't know. I just don't know that Anchorless was the right spot for this kind of... But also, at the same time, the results of the LP, maybe it was the right spot. Maybe the problem is the wrong type of producer, because they don't actually have a producer. He's just kind of credited as recording. Yeah. So maybe actually working with a producer would have helped. I looked at because when I take my notes on my songs, I give each song a score, and it goes 4, 3.75, 3.5, 3.25. It literally goes down as the record. Like, there's no song on the back half that's a 4. There's no song on the back half that's a 3.7. Like, it literally gets to a point, and it's just like, all right, we put all our A songs, all our B songs, all our C songs, all our D songs, and they're in that order. Not in the, like, maybe you should mix that up, shuffle that around. Like, yeah, sequencing in order from best to worst that's death for a record. Like, that's, I mean, so re-listening to it, to me, I was like, heck yeah, this is good. Like, this first couple tracks, like the opener, December's the longest month, good opener. That's a good opener.
It's not like the fastest song, but it's got a lot of energy. It catches you kind of right away. Good leads, good choruses, and then you take it up a level. That the high fidelity, you take it up a notch. Hot 97 Summer Jam, super fun song, high energy, really catchy, accurate title for a song. Should not have been on a November record, but they did put the EP out earlier in the year. And then weirdly, normally where you go cool down, they put like the incredibly fast-paced Coffee third, which is the song that the dude sings. I think it's Drew. And normally I'm like, oh no, they let the dude sing. But actually, it's not that. It's a pretty good song. I enjoyed his song.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. If he sang like 3 songs on the record, I would probably be like, all right, guy. We're not doing a Lemuria here. We don't need to hear all the Alex songs. But they don't cool it down. They do Novella, Ella. That's a high, fast-paced song. And it's like, okay, so this is going to be one of those records that's just kind of like a high-energy front-to-back record. That's cool, too. I love those kind of records. You can have a great record that's got a ton of energy front-to-back, but it does not turn into that kind of record.
No.
And in fact, it gets slower as the album goes on, because the middle of the record is all the mid-paced songs, and the back end of the record is like the slow songs. Like,
it's very much, it's funny because like, it's kind of like as an LP, you're getting the first half is On the Mouth and the second half is Foolish, but it's not the best songs from Foolish.
Yeah. Superchunk is definitely, so I was listening to this record and I was like, oh yeah, remember when these bands sounded like Superchunk? Because there were a few at this time period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember it being the time period where everybody was citing Superchunk, but they didn't sound like Superchunk. But I was revisiting this one, I was like, oh, there's the Superchunk.
Yeah.
There's the Mac guitars.
Especially, which song is it? There's one song in here. I want to say there's a song in here that sounds like Precision Auto.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we're doing On the Mouth Lemuria. Or, not Lemuria. Songs About Boats is a Lemuria kind of sounding song. Yeah, we're doing like an On the Mouth type Superchunk here. Maybe it's named that thing. But yeah, I was. Oh, no, it's Coffee. It's the dude's song.
It's Coffee.
Which he's the guitarist. And looking at what Anika has done since Chumped, I think he is the sound of the band. I think he's the one who he's like, we're a punk band. We're playing this kind of stuff. Because everything Anika has ever done after this is like indie, like slower indie and it's like singer-songwriter type stuff.
Bedroom pop, yeah.
Yeah. So like Drew, I think, was the punk guy in the band. And so he's probably writing the music. She's writing the lyrics. She plays guitar too, but I think she's just more like rhythm. Yeah, it starts so strong and then just ends so weak. And it's a bad sequencing. I think there's a way to salvage this by resequencing, like keeping some of the energy.
Sort of. Yeah, sort of.
I think it keeps it from feeling as long as it does. If you reorder some stuff. But you're right, the songs themselves aren't that strong on the back half though. Like that's the weakness of the album.
Yeah.
The songs aren't as good.
Because, and that's the thing is like when I listened to the EP, I was like, there's variety here. There's different kinds of songs on here. It's not all just fast songs beginning to end of the EP. Like, but they're stronger songs than it's like that EP worked so well because all of the songs were really good. And the LP has some really good songs on it, some great songs on it, but it just doesn't have enough. Maybe about half the record is really good songs. And then the rest, it's like, fine, not unenjoyable, not particularly terrible or anything.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything on here that you're just like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like not what I want or what I would have done.
They just don't. There's too many songs that are just not quite memorable enough.
Yeah.
They're like, so, and like, I remember liking this record despite the sort of like kind of backlash to it or like lukewarm reception to it. And I remember thinking people were wrong because I was just thinking about the beginning of the record.
Yeah. I do. I kind of remember some of our friends being like, it's all right. It's kind of their takeaway. And I was like, no, it's a good record. And it's like, no, I think they were just tuned in on a little bit more tuned in on like what they doesn't work as well. Because you're right. It is. You're just remembering the first half of the record. Like, yeah, it's fun. High energy, catchy, great melodies, fun stuff, good guitars. And you kind of lose a lot of that on the back half. Just it's a very forgettable album on the B side.
Yeah. And so it's like I get now why it fell out of my listening. I mean, it's like that and combined with the fact that it's like they just didn't follow it up. They broke up. and which probably leads us to the postscript.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I was considering this album, is because we can do the entire career with this band because there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to cover. We have 2 EPs that, like, yeah, we could do them in an extra play in the future, but I don't think they're winning any polls to get into that round. Maybe the first one, if anyone of our producers remembers that EP to vote for it. But this is the record, so this is the thing to talk about from the band. So yeah, so they put this record out in November. They do wind up doing touring in support of it. They wind up touring with AJJ, Jeff Rosenstock, Smith Street Band in 2015. They follow that up with a tour with the Menzingers. This record is mostly favorably reviewed. It's a lot of like A's and B's. There's some A's and some B's, like some 7s in a 10-point scale too. And they're scheduled to play the Fest in 2015. They announce on Halloween, October 31st. I do remember this. They announced it on like Instagram. Chumped are breaking up. And
Hiatus.
Yes, hiatus.
It did say hiatus.
It still technically is an indefinite hiatus. Don't hold your fingers that that's going to happen anytime soon. But
Best
yeah.
announcement, round 2.
Yeah.
See if we can zeitgeist that.
Yeah, that'd be wild. So yeah, they announce on October 31st, 2015 that they are going to be going on hiatus, and that the Fest performance on November 1st is going to be their last. Like, they advertise, they say this is going to be our last show. And so I remember we saw that post the night before, we heard about it, and we're like, whoa, Chumped are breaking up and they're playing tomorrow. And we didn't go see them. They played at the Woolly. And I remember we went and saw something at the Atlantic, and we like came out from whoever we saw in there, and we saw a pretty long line. It was a good long line. It was a really long line. It's like, oh, that's the line for Chumped. And I think we were like, well, you want to go wait in it? And I think we were like, nah. I don't know how much of that was just us being like, I saw them, and the record not sticking with us like a year later. Yeah, we didn't go see that set. It winds up not being their actual last set. They do wind up doing a show in New York in February. Makes sense. You don't necessarily want your very last thing to be Fest if it wasn't planned to be your last show, So they wind up doing their last show. They have Jeff Rosenstock, Adult Dude, and Chris Gethard's Smith's cover band.
Of course, it's Jeff Rosenstock and Chris Gethard doing a joke band.
Well, was Rosenstock in the joke band?
Dude, whoever the fuck that is.
I remember that name, Adult Dude, but I never listened to them at all. Let me see if I can get an album cover to shake something loose. But there were too many adult bands at one point. Adult Mom, Adult Jeans, Adult Dude. God, I don't even remember this album cover. Wow.
No, I don't remember Adult Dude.
Wow. I kind of remember that single with the hair, but yeah, weird. Yeah, they were like a New York band because they were talking them up in articles around this time. They were like a new band. And yeah, that's their last show. And so there's like a weird thing that kind of happened around this where people were just like, so why are y'all breaking up? And the answer was kind of just unsatisfying. They really did not give a solid answer.
They never have.
So I read one interview.
I mean, their answer at the time was, if it's not fun anymore, we don't want to do it.
Yeah. And they said that there were pressures that they felt on the band, and it just didn't feel the same. Like, that was their reasoning. And
which is possible. It's possible that is it. That is just it. That's the reason that because of how much they kind of like the leading up to this LP, it's kind of just like, yeah, we'll like put this out, I guess. Like, they're just a band that's doing it for the hang.
Yeah.
Kind of. And like every step for them, it's like, well, this is the first time we've ever toured. This is the first time we've ever played a festival.
Yeah, I did read one interview. I think it was an interview for when the first Katie Ellen LP came out. And Dan Farelli and Anika were in Katie Ellen. And they were basically, the one thing that really that jumped out to me was that they were a band who just kept saying yes to everything that would come their way. So it'd be like, hey, you want to play this show? Yeah, yeah. Hey, you want to go on tour? Yeah, yeah. Hey, you want to put out an EP on my label? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, you want to do an LP? Yeah, yeah. Let's do that. Yeah. You want to play tour with Menzingers? Yeah, yeah. And there was just a consistent like, you want to tour Europe? I'm like, yeah. Because they even said that like, if this is the last thing we do, at least we got to tour Europe was like one thing that one of the members said. And it was just like, they had no expectations on what this band was going to be. It seemed like they had no goals with the band. And maybe because they gained some hype, they gained some traction, they put out an LP, they go on some pretty decent tours, but it doesn't feel like people love the record really as much. And maybe there's just this like, well, what's next idea? And they're like, I don't know what is next. There is something too that they said that like, I read one interview that was like right as the record came out, and it said like 3 of us quit our jobs to go on tour, and they all had like full-time professional jobs, like real jobs. Like they had New York jobs. Like Drew, I think he said he worked some like wine company that had lots of like high-end, patrons, and it was just like a very like, there's money in this shit. And like the one guy, he was working at that farmer's market. So I think it was like Rick's Picks was the name of like the company that he was working for. It's like a pickle company, and he was working for them. And it's like a real company. It's like they're doing business. I don't remember what Anika's job was. It was pretty big too, though. I remember that they were professional, like almost office jobs for some of them, except the one guy, he's like, I'm a barista. Yeah. He's like, yeah, I quit and come back, and nobody cares what happens to me.
He had the job you're supposed to have when you're in a band.
Yeah. And so like they all quit their jobs to be in this band. And so when they break up, Drew goes immediately back to Colorado. He's like, I guess I got to go home because he doesn't have a job anymore. He stays there, and he has to like fly to New York for the last show and like practice with them because they hadn't practiced in months since, I'm assuming they did nothing between Fest and the February show. And so, yeah, it's a case of, so one of the things that Anika said is it's like there became a point like after the album cycle winded down, they had a moment to breathe, and she realized, she's like, what have we done to our lives? She's like, we have literally flipped our entire lives upside down. And now that we're, between albums and like there's not as many like touring opportunities, they're kind of like, what now? So that plays a big part in it. So it is a case of like, I think that's what it is. They just had no goals that they were working towards. It was just like something fun they were doing that just stopped being fun.
Yeah. They had no real aspirations to do it at the level that they were able to do it. They were just good and got offers, and they kept saying yes to things, and they could have, I think that they're a band that would have benefited from like good management.
Yeah.
Someone to say, you guys have the potential for longevity, but you can't say yes to everything. You need to say yes to the things that will grow, but you need to also give yourself time to work on the next thing you're going to do and know what you're going to do a year from now. Not just, you just got off tour and you got another tour offer.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool if you're just like, man, we had no expectations and we got to do all this fun stuff. That is awesome. But clearly there is something else there, because especially with Anika, like she's not stopped making music since Chumped. She like immediately starts playing in the band called the Rentiers after they break up, which is Joel Tannenbaum of Plow United and Ex-Friends, Mikey Erg, and Scotty Sandwich of Almost People and Wolves and Wolves and Wolves and Wolves. I did not know he was in that band. I was like, oh, Scotty.
Oh, weird.
I think he joins her like one record after they were already a thing for a couple of years. So like she immediately jumps into another band as soon as Chumped is over. And it's like, well, you didn't have to stop Chumped then if you wanted to keep making music, Now maybe it's a case of, I don't know, Mikey's just like, you want to come play? And she's like, yeah, why not? But so then after that, she does Katie Ellen with Dan Frelly. They do like an LP and a couple EPs on like Lauren Records. It's very different. It's like slow indie. I never got into the Katie Ellen stuff like I did Chumped. She did that one-off band Sheena, Anika, and Augusta, which was the Sheena Zella of Lemuria and Augusta Koch of Cayetana and later Gladdy. And then she's released solo music on her own. Like she put out an EP last year. She has like an LP, I think, under her own name too. I think Dan Fairley's involved in that stuff too. And so Drew goes back to Colorado. He starts playing in a band called Your Loss, which was like a side project with like 2 members of Elway. And it's not very good, but it was a punk band, which to me shows, okay, he was the one writing the punk songs in the band. And then all the stuff that Anika wrote is more like indie singer-songwriter stuff. So clearly there was a desire to make music there. And you're right. Maybe they didn't even have a band manager. They might have had like a booker, like somebody who, booked the tours for them. But I would not be surprised.
Not necessarily if they're not even the headliner on those tours.
Yeah, that's true too. You don't need one if you're just going with it. But they went on tour, on their own at one point. So yeah,
they could have. I mean, they could have booked that themselves. Yeah, I don't know.
And I think that they kind of became this. Because I think even the article, there's like a Vice article from 2016 about it was like after their last show. And the article was like, well, there was a lot of expectation on this band, and then they just decided to call it quits. And everybody's kind of like, that's weird. Why? And no satisfying answers. So it's like,
it's wild to start this band like as a hobby and just and fumble your way into being a band that in like a 3-year span has retrospective articles being written. Your final show is getting written about in Vice, and they're like, what could have been?
Yeah. And it's a case of like, you guys know you don't have to stop. It's a very weird, like,
you can just slow down.
You can take a break, maybe come up with a different sound. Maybe you're bored with the sound, or Anika just doesn't want to play that kind of stuff anymore. And yeah. I always wondered if there was something else going on internally with this band. I mean, it's pure speculation. Maybe there are some disagreements on what to do, but they all seem pretty friendly. Though it does seem like the final that final article was like they're interviewed separately. So I don't know. It could be a case of they want to do different things. But yeah, it's weird. It's a weird one. It's just like it just kind of fizzled. Is really how it played out. Because I feel like there's a world where they're still active and still big and putting out records, Yeah. There was room for this, I don't know. Yeah, it's a strange one. It's a strange case. It's like, I feel like they could have been huge. And it's funny that like your LP is technically your sophomore slump. Usually they do 2 LPs and then the second LP is the slump, but no. Yeah, I don't know. Any final thoughts on this record?
No, not really. I will say I do wish Chumped still was a band.
Yeah.
Because I think despite the flaws of this record, there was still a lot of potential for what they were doing.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it was a very untapped potential band. Like, yeah, this record's not a classic. It's not, a front to back great album, but it was positively reviewed. It was not panned anywhere. We got like a 7 something from Pitchfork, which is decent, There were articles about them all the time. They got interviewed all the time. They got on these good tours. They had good spots on fests, and yeah, I don't know. It is a case of like, man, what if? Which, yeah, I mean, Anika's the star, right? Like listening to this record, she's kind of the piece that makes it all kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but it's not because you don't care about the other stuff she's done.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed her
Not
last
that
EP, but I don't think I listened to the LP she put out a few years ago. I don't think I really even like the Katie Ellen stuff. Yeah, it is.
I think there's more to it than just she's the focal point of the band. Because I think the guitar playing is really interesting. I think that I think really what does work about the band and why there's so much potential is that there's this kind of voice with this kind of music.
Yeah, there's not a lot of that.
Because I think this kind of voice is not that remarkable in like a singer-songwriter context. And like not to even like there's a whole side of like the lyrics that we didn't even really touch on that much. I guess there's something to say there. The lyrics probably not quite. She's probably better as a lyricist later, but I don't know. I think she's fine as a lyricist here, but I also it's funny to hear this record now and think about then and think about how it's like so much of this record is like the fear of getting older is like the main lyrical theme of this record. And it's like, you're what, 25?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. 20s for sure. Yeah.
You're in your 20s. Calm down. And I know that it's just young bands do this. People, 25-year-olds think they're ancient. It's like, you can get a lot older, I promise.
Well, so I don't know if you remember this. They covered Die Young, the Kesha song, which we heard them do, which that's a song about like, it's about getting old, really. It's not literally about dying young, but yeah, like making the most of the moment while we can.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I know they said that whenever the first Katie Ellen record came out, like she had like ended like this super long-term relationship she'd been in, and it was another case of like she doesn't know who she is or what she's doing, and it kind of fits in with what was Chumped. It's like very much like young people not knowing what they're doing, and not having an idea or a goal or anything in mind. Which does that come from just being like accidentally successful? Like, oh shit, what am I now? They had real jobs too. That's the other thing too. So it's like really young, having real jobs in New York City. You're not all just service industry workers,
Yeah.
with just this burning desire to do something on the side. Like it definitely, like, yeah. And I think that's what it is. They just didn't know what they wanted. And who knows what they want now. I mean, Anika's still putting music out, but Drew had some other band too with like one of the other guys from Elway. So he just got into that crowd, but they're like Colorado bands that didn't do anything. That LP that they put out, the Your Lost band, in the like Bandcamp bio, they were like, we're probably not going to play any shows. So it was just like so even that was just like a meh, whatever. And the one dude was like, just like the other guy was like, I'm just focused on making beats. The guy from New Jersey, he's probably just went back to working at the farmer's market in New Jersey. I don't know. It's kind of a frustrating. It's unsatisfying.
Yeah.
Like
Everything about it is unsatisfying. The story of the band, the LP, it's all like, unfulfilled hype and squandered potential.
Yeah. And even an unsatisfying album. It's a good record, but
a good record that's flawed. It's
good, not great. Yeah.
It's a record that could have. I wonder too, like how many of the reviews were, well, I want to be part of something. How many of those reviews were like overselling the record because the writer of it was like, well, I want to be, the one that gets to review this hyped record.
Yeah. I want a piece of this.
I want to be the one heaping praise.
Yeah. I want to be on their next album's sticker on the outside of the.
Yeah, I want to be the pull quote that the PR person sends to the next for the next record.
Yeah. Well, let's give it a rating and get out of here. What are you giving it?
On my updated, much meaner scale, I'm giving this a 3. Which sounds worse than it is. That's above average. On a 5-point scale with half points, 2.5 is middle.
I was going to give it a 3.75, but now that we talked about it, I'm going to give it like a 3.5. Like I'm going down on it. Yeah. Just a little unsatisfying. It's kind of, I guess, how I felt about it when it came out too. Excited for it at first, liked it at first, defending it at first, and then like it was in like
less than a year later, you're done.
Yeah, not listening to it again. Yeah. Oh, hadn't listened to it in years. Well, all right. I think that will do it for us. So thank you all so much for listening. You can follow us on all forms of social media. Punk Lotto Pod, everywhere you can look for us. punklotopod@gmail.com. Our voicemail line, 202-688-PUNK. If you have any questions for our future mailbag episode. We got a couple things. We got a couple voicemails. We got one like written question that was sent to us. So I'll put up something soon to try and track some more questions. But yeah. That'll do it for now. So thank you all so much, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.